Hello, welcome to the 77th episode of the series Decolonizing the Mind. Today I'll talk about what happened in the last week and how it is a demonstration of imperial arrogance and the decline of Western civilization. Now, an important development was the Arab plan presented by Egypt that would ensure that the Palestinians would remain on the land in Gaza. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi proposed to form an administrative committee of independent Palestinian professionals to temporarily oversee Gaza's affair, paving the way for the return of the Palestinian Authority. This is a no-go. Hamas says they agree with the independent professionals that could govern Gaza. Obviously, there's no role for the Palestinian Authority because the authority has been lost during this war with the shameful attitude that they took in the past 3 years and the past decades, basically. Now, the Egypt plan outlines a 5-year roadmap, and it costs 53 billion, which is, the money that probably will have to be paid by the Arabs and not by the Israelis who caused all this damage in the first place. So it's in a recovery phase of 6 months, would cost 3 billion, and will be aimed at clearing unexploded material, debris, providing temporary housing. And then the next phase is a 20 billion reconstruction, running until 2027 and focusing on rebuilding infrastructure and permanent housing. And then the last stage extending to 2030, which will cost an additional 30 billion, aims to build more housing, infrastructure, industrial and commercial facilities. That is the Arab plan. It's a reaction on the plan of Donald Trump for ethnic cleansing. And the White House has said that the Arab plan doesn't address the reality that Gaza is currently uninhabitable. So Trump says that he stands by his vision to rebuild Gaza free from Hamas, meaning free from the Palestinians. So where do we go now from this plan and the American plan? Obviously, the Donald Trump plan is just a fantasy. It's not going to be realized. And the Arab plan is also a fantasy for now. It doesn't tackle the problem of the Israelis who are unwilling to coordinate, to work according to this plan. They want to keep the war going, as we'll see. An interesting thing was the interview, which last week was broadcasted in YouTube with Tucker Carlson and the Qatari Prime Minister. And it was interesting because the Prime Minister says that the US asked Qatar to open channels of communication with Hamas many years ago, just as they did with the Taliban, where the US conducted direct negotiations with the Taliban. Although they say that they want nothing to do with Hamas, they won't talk to Hamas, but apparently successive administrations asked Qatar to be a mediator in this process. And the Prime Minister also shed light on his relation with Steve Witkoff, the Trump's envoy for Western Asia. And he says, we have done business. I've known him for a long time. I attended his son's wedding. I have a personal relation. So he's saying, the peace deal which was agreed upon between the US, Hamas, and Israel was mediated by Steve Witkoff based on their relations with Witkoff. There are many forces in Israel who think that Qatar is operating on behalf of Hamas, but the Prime Minister denies that. And he had another interesting thing to say about Iran. He says, we worked against each other in Syria for 14 years. This is an open acknowledgement of how they supported these extremist groups which have now taken power. But the reality kicks in and they say that, he says that we made a bilateral relation between Qatar and Iran as a relation of necessity, that we need to have this engagement together all the times. So the disagreement they have, he says, we talk about it, we try to understand each other concern and try to find common ground. Now, this is interesting because in the effort to engage in a war with Iran, the largest military base in Western Asia is in Qatar, the US military base. So this could be a problem for Qatar if a war ensues with Iran between the US and Israel on the one hand and Iran on the other hand. Qatar will be a victim of it because the military base there will be attacked. And that's the last thing Qatar wants. So they're working against this trend of a war with Iran. Israel, on the other hand, wants to restart the war in Gaza. More destruction. It has no goal, another war, because they didn't defeat Hamas. They saw that. But they want to start a regional war, ultimately going to Iran. And they hope that Trump, who proclaims to be anti-war, in the case of Israel, will be pro-war. Trump announced that he sent a message to Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, saying that he wants to negotiate. The Iranian mission to the UN says we didn't receive the message. The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Arashi said Tehran will not hold talks with Washington as long as the Trump administration pursues a policy of maximum pressure. And the Supreme Leader himself said that he rejects talks with the US that doesn't care about solving problems. Basically, he's saying, look, there was a deal, just honor the deal which is already there. Here's what I mean by the arrogance of the empire. Trump thinks that, everybody would obey his orders if he said, I'm sending you messages. It's either a military campaign against you or a deal. So let's make the deal. That the Iranians would say, okay, let's talk and make the deal. That is not how the world works. And that's imperial arrogance is falling flat on the reality of the resistance. Now, Israel, the new chief of staff, Eyal Samir, said that 2025 will be a year of war, focused on Gaza and Iran, while other fronts also being given attention. So this guy is already saying, look, 2025 will be a year of war. And they have developed this new Iran units in the IDF intelligence and Air Force commands, and they are preparing for a war with Iran, trying to get the US involved. What is really very heartwarming is the way the Iranians tackle the issue. President Pezeshkian says unity is key to countering enemy plots. He says if division arises and differences emerges, we will not be able to achieve the goal. We must therefore join hands, open up our hearts, put up with each other, and not easily get angry or lose temper. And no power can bring to still stand a nation that is united, follows her leader and moves toward a direction. And we are capable of disrupting flawed calculation. We shall not capitulate to any threat that enemies would make. This is possible using unity and cohesion. This is a very sensible strategy in countering the coming war. Now, then it's heartbreaking to watch the internet, how the Syrian extremists are murdering, are carrying out a genocide against the Alawite population in Latakia and Tartus, where thousands of people are being killed, and the world is standing again and basically is doing nothing to stop it because they support these extremists. Syria and Israel have now negotiations. This is a horrible situation developing in Syria. Then there is another thing, that is the tariffs that Trump wants to impose on Canada, Mexico, Europe, China, the whole world. And the interesting thing is that each thing is different, obviously. In the case of Mexico, for example, the difference is this. Mexico, there are 20,000 US companies with operations or subsidiaries in Mexico. And they span various industries: manufacturing, technology, automotive, retail, services. There are companies like General Motors, Ford, Walmart, Coca-Cola, Microsoft. They have significant operations in Mexico. So Mexico is a key destination for US investment. There's a trade agreement, the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, and this is all because of the lower labor cost. So let's say Coca-Cola produces cola in Mexico and brings it to the United States to sell it there. What happens if you give tariff? You hurt Coca-Cola. You're not, you're hurting your own companies. Mexico is the main trading partner of the United States and exporting annually 490 billion in 2023, which is 30% of Mexico's gross domestic product. So reality kicks in again, and now Trump has postponed the tariff for Mexico because of this peculiar situation. So we'll see that they put up a policy, then stop and then revise it, and then think that things are not going as they plan. This is, just a crazy world we are living in now. And then the other thing that came out last week is that Europe funds Russia's war. Despite all these things about being anti-Russia, etc., in fact, Europe has spent more Russian oil and gas, bought more Russian oil and gas than they spent aid to Ukraine, as Trump claimed. So the European states purchased 205 billion Russian fossil fuels, including oil, coal, and gas, since the start of the invasion. The European Commission says that they gave 133 billion aid to Ukraine. So basically, Russia got about 70 billion more than Ukraine from the US, from the European Union. This is hypocrisy, because if they wouldn't buy, the prices are rising in Europe, but if they wouldn't buy it there, it would be worse now. Imperial arrogance is that you don't control the world, yet you act as if you do. And then when reality checks in and kicks in, you have to adjust. The thing is that the US has no military means to impose their will on others anymore. So the only instruments are boycotts and tariffs, but both don't work. And this is how a dying empire looks like. So that's for now. Subscribe to this channel if you want to support it. Share it with friends, families, and colleagues, and encourage them to subscribe. Get involved in discussion groups and make a donation. See how you can do that at sanderhira.com. Thank you for your attention.